Grüß, willkommen in einem neuen Aufregens video. Welcome to another exciting videos. In this case, episode 34 of my Battles series of videos. This video is covering a very hypothetical United Earth versus Romulan war based on the Star Trek, the original series scripts. This is a rather unusual video for this channel as it covers a fictional war between United Earth and Romulans based on the Star Trek, the original series scripts. When it does not conflict with the original series, I will certainly use other references, such as from Star Trek Enterprise, but this is simply to avoid reinventing the wheel. This account of that war is primarily based on the original series scripts only. I have created this for a possible board game and to create scenarios for a possible Star Trek figure game. In this video, I'll not be spending time covering the original series references and speculation in order to fill the gaps that exist. If viewers wish to know the original series references that I'm using and the reason why I filled in the gaps in the manner I did, I would advise you to view my Sci-Fi Channel, which contains a number of videos covering this. The URL to the Sci-Fi Channel will be in the notes of this video. However, if you wish to avoid ploughing through the vast number of videos I have on this channel, the video which covers the specific references to the Earth-Romulan War is titled Season 3, Episode 18, Star Trek, the Original Series Timeline Analysis, Earth-Romulan War 2150-2159. The video which covers space combat that I'll be using for this video is in Season 3, Episode 31, Star Trek, the Original Series Timeline Analysis, Space Combat. My only caveat in the last video is that this describes space-based conflicts during the time of Kirk, based obviously on the original series scripts and the actual TV programs. As a result, I've had to make some major assumptions around how this type of warfare differed during the Earth-Romulan War period, based on really only a single vague statement in the original series scripts. All the spacecraft I'm using in this video come from existing Star Trek fan art, assumptions and theory sites, which are used by many space combat rules in this era, or for this era. In this area, I have no interest in reinventing any wheel. While I will be following the original series scripts to the letter, I have had to fill an awful lot of gaps. My speculation is primarily based on Occam's razor as much as possible, so my explanations is as simple and plausible as possible based on the minimal facts I may possess. It's possible other explanations, which are more plausible and simpler, exist, and if I find a compelling example, then I may come back to redo the video. But as I've been studying the original series script since the mid-1990s, I feel I've probably come up with possibly a compelling best-case theory. A final caveat before we get into the video, the original series timeline is not the Star Trek Enterprise timeline, nor is it the Next Generation timeline. As a result, this account will not align with those series. My objective is to try and understand what was in Gene Roddenberry's mind when he created the original series, not later interpretations or interpretations from other authors or writers. I have no doubt you could create a very different history of the war if you use the Next Generation and Enterprise scripts, and perhaps someone in the future will do this because that may actually be an interesting project. To assist in understanding what is occurring, I shall use this map. On the left you'll see the Sol system, Earth and Mars, and on the right the Romulan system, Romulus and Remus. The blue area is the United Earth zone of influence, and the red area is the Romulan zone of influence, or at least the areas they've explored. The Vulcans and most other developed alien races are off the screen to your left. These races did not get involved in the early stages of the war, and only the Vulcans became militarily involved after the Romulans were pushed back, as far as I can work out. Although the other alien nations were almost certainly providing economic assistance in the form of something like Lend-Lease to assist United Earth. The systems shown include all systems mentioned in the original series script, as well as systems which need to exist based on the scripts, even if they're not named. So many at this point were not colonized, especially the star bases, which did not actually exist during this period of the Star Trek Enterprise world. Just a quick key, the values in the circles represent the Z-axis. Plus means it's north of Sol and minus means it's south of Sol on the galactic plane. The values represent 10 light years, so a value of -2 means 20 light years south of Sol. The radius of the United Earth was about 200 light years at this time, while the Romulan radius was slightly greater, although their system density was less, so both sides are about equal in terms of size. Let's look at both sides, or at least their population and economic power. When the war began in earnest, the United Earth possessed 3 major planets and 5 minor colony planets of about 1 million each, or greater population. Earth, Mars and Alpha Centauri possessed significant industry, although only Earth and Mars had the capacity of manufacturing major warships. Alpha Centauri had the ability to manufacture smaller spacecraft, but the other colony planets possessed only light industry, capable of manufacturing missiles or photon torpedoes and small fighter spacecraft only. In addition to these planets, United Earth was in the process of building up colonies on 42 other planets or systems scattered around the United Earth sphere of influence, normally no more than 100 light years from Earth. These planets would typically have a population of more than 3,000 and under 1 million, probably on average around about 400,000. Apart from providing food to the United Earth military, these systems did not possess useful manufacturing capacity to engage in war or to make war equipment. On top of this was a couple of dozen agricultural planets of between 100 and 300 people, mining bases and research bases on various planets, which were typically located outside the 100-year light radius area from Earth and within 200 light years from Earth. 4 of these systems were directly affected by the Romulan advance into United Earth space. These planets were evacuated and all agricultural capacity destroyed before the Romulans took the systems. United Earth adopted a scorch Earth strategy. All the systems, these were quite minor systems, in the path of the Romulans' advance had asteroid-based defences orbiting around the main planet. These acted as a minimal supply and repair capacity for United Earth raiders, and when attacked required the Romulans to expend significant numbers of photon torpedoes or missiles in order to destroy them. They were manned by a very small crew and were similar to the future observation bases constructed to monitor the neutral zone. Their primary weapons were missiles and a small number of fighters. Their defences was the asteroid and, of course, phaser banks. In addition to the directory-controlled systems, United Earth had 7 alien civilizations within its sphere of influence, one being Vulcan and the other the recently contacted Anar. United Earth could also leverage an additional 6 alien civilizations in the Vulcan Trade Association, which were outside of United Earth's sphere of influence. Apart from Anar, none were involved in the first half of the war. They did, however, economically assist, providing a form of lend-lease, which freed up United Earth manufacturing capacities to construct weapons of war. By the end of the war, Vulcan was beginning to provide direct military aid, although Vulcan technical assistance in the mid-period of the war were assisted greatly and was probably more useful. Most of these alien civilizations were wary about getting dragged into a major war, but were fearful of the very aggressive or seemingly aggressive Romulan Star Empire. The Romulan Star Empire did not undertake any major colonization efforts after creating their first 2 colonies, Remus and Romy. Instead, they conquered alien planets and after taking them over, garrisoned them with troops. Up to 6 alien systems had been conquered and occupied by the Romulan Star Empire. These systems provided food to the Romulan fleet and economically were a useful market for Romulan products. They possessed light industry and some possessed heavy industrial capacity which could produce light spacecraft. The bulk of Romulan manufacturing occurred in their main system, which contained Romulus and Remus, and there was only one major interstellar colony planet possessing some light industry. The Romulans did possess mining, research and military bases in their sphere of influence, some of which possessed defences. Apart from any economic reasons, these were designed to provide bases for the Romulan fleet and keep an eye on surrounding space. They did provide food, similar to United Earth agricultural bases, which assisted with logistics in terms of the Romulan fleet. Economically, the Romulan Star Empire was inferior to United Earth, but militarily it was its equal, and it possessed superior experience and apart from a lack of warp drive, superior military technology. The Romulan Star Empire pursued a policy of conquest, so apart from the short initial period after first contact with the new alien civilization, they conducted little to no trade outside of their sphere of influence or control. The key trigger or cause of the war was contact with Anar, that's Romulan contact with Anar, and its two colony planets. Both United Earth and the Romulan Star Empire contacted Anar around about the same time. The Romulan Star Empire efforts were simply to provide sufficient information to determine how to conquer the planets, although some minor trade may have occurred during this investigation period. This section will cover United Earth's first contact with Anar. As part of the colonisation program of United Earth, FTL probes were sent to all G-type systems. In 2091, a probe was sent to the system which was eventually named Anar Colony 1. The following year, a probe was sent to the Anar home system. These probes were low-cost, impulse-driven probes capable of 20c, or 20 times the speed of light, which would take 4 years to get to their target and then a year cruising into the system to avoid potential detection. These probes lacked FTL communication technology and were designed to return to the base to provide any information found. When the first probe arrived at the Anar Colony 1, 5 years later, after travelling 200 light-years, it detected the signatures of intelligent life. It only stayed long enough to confirm this and then immediately sped back to its base, cruising out of the system with minimal energy signature and then engaging impulse drive to achieve 50 times the speed of light and to get back after 5 years. At this time, FTL communication was not available for the probes. Once the FTL probe arrived back to its base, after an almost 200 light-year journey, the data was analysed and an exploration spacecraft was sent to establish diplomatic relations. The spacecraft was a sister ship to the SS Valiant, which in 2101 was warp-capable. While an old spacecraft, it was optimal for first contact to ensure if the aliens were hostile, they would not be able to capture a more modern vessel. The spacecraft was capable of warp 1 or 400 times the speed of light, so it would take 6 months to get to the system. Before making contact, it spent a significant time studying the system and what level of technology the system possessed. Once it amassed all the information it could, it then sent a probe back to base and then initiated contact with the alien civilization. The United Earth possessed FTL communication, but it only allowed for 50c, or 50 times the speed of light, speed of communication, so a probe would get back at the same time and would be secret from the alien civilization. In 2102, the probe from Anar home world arrived back to its base in United Earth territory, but no exploration ship was sent to that planet yet, as it's assumed to be in contact with Anar Colony 1, and they needed to complete that investigation first. At this point in time, the alien race was unknown, and it was unknown the initially contacted planet was a colony planet of this other planet. In 2102 AD, contact is made with Anar, and diplomatic relations are established. The Anar are an offshoot of the Andorians, who left their home planet with Vulcan assistance many years ago, probably many hundreds of years ago. They established their whole homeworld on Anar, and once fully developed, they established two colony worlds, Anar Colony 1 and 2. The homeworld is fully developed, and while cold, which is what the Anar prefer, consists of several billion individuals. The colony planets are small and consist of less than 1 million individuals each. In 2111, a trading agreement is reached. United Earth requires food to support its colony planets close to Anar, of which there are 6, as well as any spacecraft in the area. At this point in time, starbases did not exist. In return, United Earth provided Anar with manufactured products and some minimal technology that was deemed to be safe. As part of this agreement, United Earth was not permitted to send any ships to the Anar home planet, and all trade had to occur through Anar Colony 1. The Romulans had established a similar agreement with Anar, using Anar Colony 2 as their trading planet. While both United Earth and Romulans were not permitted to send ships to the Anar home planet, both did send spy probes. These observed the Anar, but never detected each other's spy probes. After all, the spy probes were designed not to be detected. Both sides, as a result, were not aware of each other at this point in time. In 2146, United Earth and Anar sign a defensive treaty. For United Earth, this is their first defensive treaty with an alien civilization and is designed to protect United Earth from that sector of their sphere of influence. All other alien civilizations that Earth or United Earth were aware of were only fundamentally trading partners. For Anar, they wanted a treaty as they were beginning to get suspicious of the Romulans. United Earth is still unaware of the Romulans. Anar's diplomatic position is to play the United Earth and Romulans against each other, but by 2146 Anar suspects the Romulans may be getting ready to attack them. To assist with the signing of the treaty, they do not inform the United Earth about the Romulans. The Anar fear were not unfounded, and in 2150 the Romulans make their move. This part of the video covers the course of the actual conflict or war. The Romulans attack in 2150 and occupy Anar Colony 2 by 2151 with minimal fighting. Before moving into the Anar home planet or system, the Romulans want to secure Anar Colony Planet 2 as a source of food and a secure base close by. They have assessed the Anar do not possess sufficient military capacity to resist effectively, so see no need to hurry. While United Earth is not yet directly involved, this marks the beginning of the Earth-Romulan War. After the attack by the Romulans, Anar asks United Earth for assistance as part of their treaty, and United Earth sends a small fleet of 2 spacecraft, which were at Anar Colony 1 at the time, to the Anar home world. The Anar fleet consists of 4 capital ships, as well as a number of smaller craft. The addition of the United Earth spacecraft was an unexpected surprise for the Romulans. A Romulan invasion force of 4 capital ships, a number of smaller warships, supporting ships and troop transports were defeated at Anar, home world. The Romulans suffer heavy losses when some of their troop transports were destroyed. The Anar and United Earth suffer minimal losses as well, but now the United Earth is fully involved in the war and communication probes are sent back to United Earth area for reinforcements. However, these will take a while to arrive. In the meantime, the only spacecraft close by can assist. They also send FTL communication, but as indicated earlier, these only travel at 50 times the speed of light. But these do get to other craft close by. The Romulans have also called for reinforcements, which initially those that arrive are based close by. The Earth spacecraft can travel at 400 times the speed of light generally, so can reach Anar in 6 months, while the Romulan top speed is closer to 200 times the speed of light, so the vessels will take a year to reach Anar from their home world. However, the Romulans have prepared for this war and have assembled supplies and ships close by, which quickly arrive. The Romulan fleet is also always on a war footing, while United Earth requires some time to prepare their fleet for war. Only the spacecraft involved in patrolling and exploring are fully ready for an interstellar war for the United Earth. The rest of the fleet at Earth and Alpha Centauri is capable of defending their respective systems but are not ready to move from these systems. Both sides slowly assemble their fleet for the next round, but the Romulans have an advantage. Both sides spent about 2 years assembling all the forces they can. However, the Romulans have most military assets close by, or more military assets close by. When the Romulans attack again in 2154, they are victorious, with heavy losses among the United Earth fleet and half the Anar space fleet escaping to the remaining Anar system colony. The Romulans now quickly attack the remaining Allied forces in Anar Colony 1 and are victorious. The surviving United Earth spacecraft retreat to the closest agricultural planets, which are 60 to 120 light years away. This occurs in 2155. The Romulans, now aware of United Earth, advance into United Earth space, taking 4 United Earth agricultural planets by 2156. These planets had 4 years to prepare, and the 100 to 1,000 inhabitants or population were evacuated, with an asteroid moved into orbit around the planet and then heavily armed with missiles, phaser banks and some fighters. This occurred with a further 4 United Earth planets, which were never attacked by the Romulans, and this acted as United Earth's first defensive position or line. While some United Earth spacecraft assisted, the Romulans outnumbered the defenders, so with minimal losses the United Earth withdrew from these systems. The objective was to delay the Romulans until the full United Earth fleet could be assembled at a large Earth colony, which was in the Romulan path to Earth, or on the Romulan path to Earth, but could not be evacuated. It was decided to make a stand at this system. The Romulans occupied these 4 agricultural systems with a small force, and after concentrating again their fleet, prepared for their next move. A small United Earth force of raiders preyed on the Romulan supply line, which required a constant flow of supply spacecraft to keep the fleet supplied with food, missiles and spare parts. These 6 spacecraft used the remaining 4th Earth systems, agricultural systems that had asteroid defensive facilities, behind the front line as their bases. This caused the Romulans some issues and required the diversion of larger spacecraft to defend the convoys. After resupplying and concentrating their fleet, and securing the United Earth systems that they'd captured, all 4 of them, the Romulans then assembled their full fleet to attack the first major United Earth system. This system possessed a population of several 100,000 and which contained significant food capability or food production capability. The Romulans, like the United Earth, used FTL probes to investigate their enemy systems. By 2157 AD, the Romulans were aware of the United Earth home planet and the major planets in between the Romulan fleet and this Earth planet or system. The United Earth has assembled the bulk of their entire fleet in this colony system in the way, and combined with its asteroid defences, managed to defeat the Romulan fleet with heavy losses. Technical assistance provided the Vulcans, specifically superior FTL communication technology, was a critical factor in this victory. The Romulans then rapidly withdrew to the Aenar home planet and attempted to form up a new fleet. However, the United Earth rapidly followed them and with their superior warp drive engaged and defeated the Romulan fleet at the Aenar home planet, assisted by Aenar rebellions. The Aenar colony planets are not defended, and the Romulans withdrew into Romulan space to better defended friendly systems. The United Earth rapidly advanced into undefended Romulan space, but find the heavily defended planets too difficult to attack. They considered that attacking them would result in too many casualties and would expend far too many photon torpedoes, so they needed to build up. They decided to occupy all suitable minor systems that they could to act as bases and defence points while they started building up their fleet and resupplying their fleet with missiles and preparing additional logistics capability. The United Earth does not wish to overextend itself, as a loss now would undo all the gains of the last 2 years. The Romulans also realised that a loss would be the end of their star empire, so at this point, in 2159, they request peace, or super for peace. Using the Aenar as intermediary, remembering the United Earth and Romulans never actually physically met or saw each other, a peace treaty is agreed to in 2160 and the neutral zone is established, shown in grey. While it appears the Romulans have lost a lot of territory, within this area occupied by Earth, the Romulans would have only had research, mining and other very minor military observation bases. No significant system was taken, and all Romulans were evacuated before the United Earth occupied the systems. After the battle in 2157, there were no major battles. The war had been decided in 2157, effectively. This map shows the neutral zone and Federation bases observing the neutral zone, as well as all the new star bases formed after the war. This map is dated 2264. We'll now be covering space combat. Space combat during the Earth-Romulan War was dominated by guided missiles or photon torpedoes. Spacecraft in 2150 possessed weaker shields and weaker phasers than those from the 2260s. The photon torpedoes possessed significant punch if they impacted a target, even though they only used an atomic warhead, although the missile itself, or photon torpedo, was slower than those from the 2260s. Even with the most powerful shields, any direct impact by a photon torpedo with an atomic warhead would still vaporize most spacecraft. There was often little left behind in such an event. In any fleet action, spacecraft always ensured adequate separation between each other to ensure no single photon torpedo could destroy more than one spacecraft. The shields were more than adequate as a meteorite shield and defense against phasers, but it was very rare for a spacecraft to be damaged by a phaser, although this did occur when all the photon torpedoes had been expended. On the other hand, due to the lower speeds of the photon torpedoes, the phasers were very effective in destroying approaching photon torpedoes, unlike 2260s. Fleet actions would consist of the two fleets approaching each other, manoeuvring around to provide some tactical advantage when they launched their photon torpedoes. The closer they could get, the less time the enemy would have to destroy the photon torpedoes with their phasers. Waiting for the right time to launch photon torpedoes would be a critical factor, as well as where those photon torpedoes were going to be concentrated onto. The idea was to get as many photon torpedoes as possible on a single target at the same time to overwhelm their defences. If one photon torpedo got through, it would be over for that spacecraft. Each fleet could throw several salvos of photon torpedoes at each other as they approached. It would be a rather chaotic and brutal battlefield to be involved in, and it would result in terrible casualties if any photon torpedo got through. When there was only a few spacecraft on each side, the primary tactic would be one of manoeuvring into an optimal position before launching a photon torpedo salvo. Due to the nature of impulse and warp drive, weapons were more effective or most effective when firing at their target or at a target that it was moving towards, while the effectiveness of weapons would dramatically drop off when firing to either side or rear. As it was unlikely a single ship's photon torpedo salvo would overwhelm another single ship, the only way of destroying a target was to get around to its flank and then firing a full salvo of photon torpedoes. This may first require damaging the opponent, which was possible with phasers and photon torpedo near misses. Often these small 1 to 2 ship actions resulted in most forces withdrawing after all the photon torpedoes were expended. Possibly they may have been damaged, but generally it ended in a draw. If a planet had an asteroid defensive base orbiting it, no enemy attack could affect the planet directly or would succeed against the planet directly. The asteroid base had to be destroyed first. An asteroid base could absorb several photon torpedo hits before being fully neutralized. Each hit could destroy photon torpedo launchers and phaser banks, but the control center was typically in the center of such a base, protected by several hundred meters of rock. A fleet would need to launch a single large salvo of photon torpedoes at close range, hoping sufficient would get through the phaser banks to destroy most of the phaser banks and photon torpedo launchers. Once the asteroid base had all its surface-deployed weapons destroyed, it could be towed with a tractor beam in such a manner as to fly off into space or fall into the planet. Once a space fleet controlled space around the planet, there was very little the planet could do. The attackers could easily rain down meteors against any defensive installation, such as phaser banks or photon torpedo launchers, and could land troops anywhere they wished. Often the only option would be to surrender and possibly conduct guerrilla warfare once the occupation forces arrived. Let's now look at the United Earth Fleet in 2150. Just for those interested, I'm basing all the ship classes on this Earth Starfleet 2135-2161 guide, which can be downloaded from the internet. I used the specific specifications of the Daedalus class from the Memory Alpha fandom wiki, where it indicates the length of this vessel is 105 metres, width 25 metres and height 40 metres with a crew of 229. The crew size seems rather large, but that's what it says in the wiki. Using this information in this diagram, I calculate the size of this vessel in cubic metres, which is then derive a weight based on the density of a modern nuclear submarine at 1G on Earth, and then using World War II warship ratios calculate how much space was allocated to ammunition, which in this case would be photon torpedoes. I'm estimating the missile load ratio is similar to a modern nuclear attack submarine. The power source is tricky, but based on a modern nuclear submarine and multiplying the result by 4 is a good starting point. Obviously, a spacecraft needs more power than that to travel in space, but I'm assuming this is available. The amount that I provide, for example in this case, 1,568 megawatts, is only available for shields and phasers, and it gives me an idea of the possible power-to-weight ratio comparison between different spacecraft. This then allows me to create formulas which gives me the same values for any other spacecraft by comparing its size on this sheet. It's not too complex, and this methodology is full of holes, but it gives me something to work with for a board game or a figure game based what's physically out there on the internet. Again, I'm not interested in reinventing the wheel here. The Ganges-class frigate had been relegated to the reserve fleet before the war began, but were quickly brought up to frontline status. All 15 were at Earth when the war began and took a year to be brought up to full readiness. The Fearless-class frigates were the main primary merchant raiders of the United Earth Forces. While weak, they would have been effective at picking off merchant shipping or convoy ships. When war began, all 8 were quickly sent to the forward line, with 1 allocated to each of the 8 fortified colonies. When United Earth went to war in 2151, this was the most numerous warship, the Daedalus class. It was reasonably old, but took the brunt of the initial Romulan attacks. When war began, all 70 were available. However, several were being upgraded when the war began and took a little while to become ready. They were deployed, or this class of ship was deployed across United Earth space, with 1 being in the Anar Colony 1 system in 2150. This was the spacecraft which blunted the Romulan attack and pushed the Romulans back, but it suffered horrendous casualties. The Freedom-class destroyer was deployed with the main fleet to provide forward scouting. 3 were allocated to the fleet, which were being prepared to stop the Romulans, while 4 were involved in the forward defence against the Romulans. Supporting the Daedalus-class light cruisers were the less numerous Einstein-class heavy cruisers. This was the heaviest ship in the United Earth fleet at the start of the war, and all 8 were allocated to the main fleet, but took about a year to be prepared before they could sally out. The Sarajevo assault ship would have transported the ground forces, if required, to liberate the minor nation planets or any other planet. As it turned out, it was never needed, as the planets that were attacked were either were Allied planets, and when they decided to occupy the Romulan small agricultural planets, there were no defences. However, if the war continued, this class of ship would have almost certainly been used a lot. The last Intrepid-class light cruiser was commissioned in 2148, so all 8 were available for the main fleet. They were all deployed at Earth when the war began. This was a powerful spacecraft which also adopted the central position in any fleet position. The NX class was the most modern effective cruiser, heavy cruiser, in the United Earth fleet. Although not as heavy as the Einstein class, only 1 was commissioned when the war began, and while building was fast-tracked, only 6 were available for the critical battle which stopped the Romulans. The Poseidon-class destroyers were built in pairs, and the first 2 were commissioned in 2156, followed by 4 for each of the following 2 years. The last 4 only arrived at the front line when the war ended. They were all allocated to the main fleet. The Cassandra frigate was the most powerful raiding spacecraft the United Earth ever built, capable of meeting a standard bird of prey, which was the heaviest ship the Romulans ever used for convoy escorts. However, by the time they were ready, they were not required for raiding, and instead they were used to protect United Earth convoys from Romulan raiders. The Oberoi-class light cruisers were built from 2157 to 2159, and only 2 were able to join the fleet before the war ended. The Yorktown battleship was also a very late war spacecraft and would have provided the United Earth with a very powerful punch in any fleet actions. The first 2 of this class managed to reach the fleet before the end of the war. If the war continued, they would have been required to meet the new powerful bird of prey battleships, which were approximately as powerful. The Minuteman class of destroyers were another late war vessel, which only saw limited action, primarily used to escort convoys. The Hunter-class frigate was also another late war light ship, which saw only limited action before the end of the war. As with many late war ships, this was used to escort convoys rather than engage in any raiding or rather than taking their place in the front line. If the war had continued, I'm sure that they would have been used in the front line or raiding. The Winchester class was the most powerful destroyer built by the United Earth. This spacecraft did not leave United Earth space before the war ended, but would have been available if the war had continued. Let's cover some basic space combat principles based on the specifications you've seen as we've listed the United Earth spacecraft. Most ships are designed to possess sufficient phasers to destroy a full salvo of missiles or photon torpedoes from a similar sized ship. Twice that number of missiles will overload the phaser defences of any spacecraft. Photon torpedoes are launched from a railgun-like tube which accelerates the photon torpedo up to 4,000 to 8,000 metres per second. Only a limited number of these launches can be deployed on a spacecraft. Some spacecraft, such as destroyers and frigates, are further limited in how many launches can be deployed, and battleships possess 8 reloads of photon torpedoes, so have also a lower ratio of launches. However, they can continue combat much later than any other vessel or cruisers. A spacecraft can launch up to a quarter of their entire missile load in a single salvo, so the Daedalus class can launch a maximum of 8 photon torpedoes and in turn possess 8 phasers facing forward, with 1 dedicated phaser required to guarantee a missile kill at normal range. At short range, the chance of a kill drops. At long range, a phaser could possibly destroy 2 photon torpedoes, so this is never conducted or recommended. There is some randomness involved here, so there is never a 100% chance of a single phaser being able to destroy a single missile, nor is it impossible for a phaser to destroy 2 missiles, but in either cases, the probability is low. Finally, the time it takes to prepare a second salvo is not insignificant, and it's not possible for a ship to launch a second salvo before the first salvo has reached its target or has been destroyed. If attacked from the side, the story changes dramatically. Because of the way impulse or warp drive contracts space in front of it, the attacker's missiles travel significantly faster, while the defender's phasers do not. This dramatically increases the chance of a missile hit, with 2 phasers required to guarantee a missile hit. In this case, the defending spacecraft is doomed if it ever should find itself in this position. When firing on the rear, the 2 spacecraft warp or impulse space distortions cancel each other out, returning us to the 1-to-1 space ratio. However, while phasers can pivot to the rear depending on the ship design, photon torpedoes cannot. They would need to be launched forward and then turn around, giving the ship in the rear much more time to destroy them. In this situation, the ship on the right is not doomed, as it can certainly destroy sufficient missiles coming towards it, but if it attempts to launch photon torpedoes at the craft behind it, it would have a very low probability of succeeding. There are a host of other tactical factors, such as photon torpedoes, which detonate very close to a ship, can damage it or temporarily blind it if it's unable to destroy it. While phasers can guarantee a kill against the photon torpedoes, some photon torpedoes may get very close, which can put that ship at a disadvantage for several critical minutes when the second enemy salvo is launched against it. Finally, once a spacecraft has discharged all missiles, it can still be used to destroy enemy photon torpedoes which are targeting another spacecraft as well as itself. When everyone has run out of missiles, it's time to go back to the fleet logistic tail to rearm as quickly as possible, or in most cases the attacker simply leaves the system to rearm in a much safer location. Let's now look at the Romulan fleet. The Romulans possessed a light spacecraft which provided scouting, patrolling and raiding capability, the Bird of Prey frigate. It was similar to the Bird of Prey class generally, but much smaller and containing smaller crew and smaller weapon systems. The most numerous spacecraft was the standard Bird of Prey destroyer, which had significantly more power or punch than a typical United Earth destroyer, and could even take on the Daedalus-like cruiser from the United Earth. The primary capital ship of the Romulan fleet was the Bird of Prey-like cruiser. It was superior to the Earth Daedalus class, but would have been equivalent to the United Earth NX class heavy cruiser. At the beginning of the war, this was a very significant foe that the United Earth found it very difficult to counter. The heaviest spacecraft in the Romulan fleet, at least up to 2156, was the Cabbage class, which was commissioned in 2156 and in time to enter the war against the United Earth, but only a few were involved at the critical battles. Most were involved at the latter stages of the war where there was very little class. This was an unmatched spacecraft until the Earth Yorktown class was commissioned. The first of the battleship variety of the bird of prey was launched in 2159, but the war ended before it could be used. In the early period, the Romulan spacecraft were better than anything United Earth possessed, with the only advantage United Earth possessing was warp drive. On the other hand, the United Earth possessed more spacecraft, and as the war progressed, built spacecraft which could match and in some cases exceed just the capability of Romulan spacecraft. Let's now look at the ANAR, or the ANAR fleet. The ANAR possessed 6 destroyer spacecraft. These were fairly small craft with minimal power, but was probably equivalent to a United Earth destroyer-class space vessel. The primary capital ship of the ANAR were its light cruisers, and they possessed 4 of them, similar to the Daedalus class from United Earth, although they lacked warp capability. In fact, all the ANAR ships lacked warp capability. Let's now look at some of the battles that occurred. In 2152, when the Romulans entered the ANAR homeworld, they expected to only face the ANAR fleet of 4 light cruisers and 8 destroyers. While they did not arrive in overwhelming numbers, they were superior, and if this is all they faced, they would have very easily defeated the ANAR. However, they faced an additional Earth force of 1 light cruiser and 2 destroyers, which did tip the balance. The Romulans could fire a salvo of 48 missiles, but the Allied fleet had 76 phases to face this. If the Romulans concentrated everything on 1 or 2 ships, they may have caused some casualties, but they did not expect to need this tactic. In return, the Allied fleet salvos numbered 51 against 100 Romulan phases. The Allies, by concentrating against one flank, were capable of destroying 2 Romulan spacecraft in the first salvo with no losses. The Romulans realised they could not win, so they withdrew, but not without the additional loss of a Romulan troop transport. This was by no means a walkover for the Allied forces. Only overconfidence on the Romulan side lost them this battle. The 2 fleets were actually reasonably evenly matched. For the second Battle of ANAR, which occurred in 2154, the United Earth was able to assemble a fleet of 12 light cruisers and 3 destroyers. The United Earth had a severe lack of light ships at this point in time. On the Romulan side, the Romulans had assembled a fleet of 4 light cruisers, 8 destroyers and 8 frigates. While the Allied fleet consisted of more spacecraft, the Romulan spacecraft were more powerful. The Romulans could launch a salvo of 196 missiles against 168 Allied phases, which was always going to result in heavy losses for the Allies. In this battle, it was the Allies who were overconfident, and after losing a number of frigates in the first salvo, and with no losses on the Romulan side, they realised they were in severe trouble. After losing a dozen spacecraft, the Allies withdrew to the ANAR colony world 1. The Allies had deployed 2 asteroid bases orbiting ANAR, which were equipped with a large number of United Earth missiles or photon torpedoes. Attacking these bases did result in the loss of 2 additional Romulan frigates. In the following year, the first Battle of ANAR Colony 1 occurred in 2155. United Earth had managed to get an additional light cruiser to reinforce the fleet, but this did not make up for the losses already suffered. The Allies had deployed an asteroid base around the colony planet and decided to make their stand close to this powerful defensive position. The Romulans, not wishing to wait in case there were more enemy reinforcements arriving, decided to attack. The Allied fleet suffered heavy losses, but this time the Romulans suffered significant losses, thanks to the asteroid defensive position. The result was foregone, however, and the Allies withdrew, although all the ANAR spacecraft were destroyed before they withdrew. To keep this video short, I will end here, so I'm not going to be covering the critical battles around the United Earth agricultural planets, nor the pivotal battle at the major Earth colony, and also the third Battle of Anar Colony. You'll just have to work that out yourself, or if I come out with a board game or scenarios, it'll all be contained there. However, based on this type of information, I will attempt to retrofit this into a campaign, into some sort of board game in addition, to try and see if I can, and I'll also try and see if I can create a figure game scenario from it as well, which will cover the battles that I haven't covered so far. I wish to thank all the sources I found on DeviantArt, which provided information on United Earth and Romulan spacecraft. The links are in the notes. And so this completes episode 34, my military history video covering a hypothetical Earth-Romulan war in the Star Trek, the original series universe. I certainly hope you enjoyed this rather hypothetical video. The links to my Sci-Fi Channel and DeviantArt sites containing Star Trek spacecraft is listed in the notes. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.